Okay, so today we have my very good friend George, who I've been talking about getting down for ages to talk about his martial art experience and bits and pieces. So really looking forward to this. We have lots of good chats ourselves, but we really need to get this stuff on so that everyone else can hear it. So George, would you like to introduce yourself to people who don't know you?
First off, thanks for having me down here, Daryl. Appreciate it.
Pleasure.
It's always good to have a good conversation with you because we can kind of iron out the world's problems. So my name is George Behan. I'm 53 years of age, father to a loving 13-year-old daughter, and that's sarcastically meant. At the moment, she's a little bit rebellious, but that's good. That's life. And I come from a military background, have an extensive martial arts background, and I work primarily as a security contractor and training consultant in various fields within the security industry, but not necessarily what people think security is. So I worked in maritime security operations in the Indian Ocean and close protection, and then training people in those fields in personal safety, situational awareness, and sometimes then training for corporate entities in terrorism awareness and things like that.
Okay, so we'll start with just the beginning, just the martial arts. Like, what was the interest? How did you get started? I know you've done extensive, you've done everything that you can be done in a lot of cases.
Mostly.
So yeah, just a quick brief history of what you've done and.
So if you grew up in our generation, you remember TV shows like Kwai Chan King, Kung Fu. I think that was the first kind of cognizant idea that popped in my head what martial arts is or could be, or what a martial artist is or could be. You know, this peaceful warrior monk walking through the world, yeah, and righting the world's wrongs and helping people, and in a sense being, while he's on his own journey of self-discovery, he's protecting people who are being unjustly treated or need protection. So that kind of woke something in me. And then I was never any good at fighting, but I grew up in an estate where there was loads of kids, so there was always fights, and there was an argument or a fight over football or whatever we were doing at that particular time of the year, whether it was pretend show jumping during the show jumping season when the RDS was on, or whether it was playing tennis when Wimbledon was on, or you know, we all played together, but we all kind of got into arguments over the rules and who got that point and who didn't, and sometimes it would end up in a bit of argy-bargy, as they say. When you grow up in a state like that where it's full of kids, there's always going to be fights, you know, and then they're brothers and they're big brothers, and you know, so you learn good escape evasion skills and maybe good negotiation skills or de-escalation skills. But then too, at the same time, if you're constantly under that pressure as a kid, you start to kind of resent not being able to protect yourself and not being able to defend yourself. So my father kind of seen that I needed a bit of training, and I ended up getting a pair of boxing gloves and being sent to the local boxing club, which was the Royston Boxing Club in Newbridge. And I trained there for about 2 years, from the age of about 9 to 11 thereabouts. Boxing wasn't for me because, as I was saying to your friend there earlier on, is I'm left-handed but I'm right-eyed. So I'm a cluster. So nobody would teach me to be a left-handed boxer because there was that many kids in the club in the beginning of the season. They didn't have time, so they got everybody just to box like a right-handed person. So if I'm right-eyed, I'm punching that way instead of that way because that's where my eye is leading me, whereas I should have been kind of that way. Yeah, I think. But that's me as a left-hander. But because my right eye was my dominant eye, it's for the rear fist. So, but my jab would be off, and I would always get hit, right? And also then the judgment. So I wasn't a great boxer, but I enjoyed the physical training. I enjoyed the sparring. Sometimes as a kid you get put with a guy who looks the same size as you, but is about 2 stone heavier, and then that doesn't work out too good either. So I think some contact sports can be a bit traumatic for people to learn and less playful than maybe they should be. Anyway, I've done boxing for 2 or 3 years, and I always had this thing in my head about martial arts, and I ended up, like many of us did, seeing all the Bruce Lee films and the Jackie Chan films and as kids and as young teenagers, your imagination runs wild and you go, right, what's the thing? And then I left home when I was about 15 and a half to work in a hotel in Dublin, out in Killiney, the Killiney Court Hotel. And ended up hanging around with the wrong people and again getting into fights and not being able to fight well. So I decided to, through advice from a friend or a recommendation from a friend at the time, to take up karate. So the style of karate I started was Kempo karate with Maurice Matten and Huey Anra out in Bray, at the penny farthing shop out there. Great little club. Got hammered on a regular basis. And some notable people used to come in and train with us now and again, like Masan Gorbani from the Master's Temple.
Okay.
I remember Masan, he was built like Bruce Lee. Ripped, very, very fit, very strong, very gentle when he needed to be and very strong when he needed to be as a martial artist. So he was, but he might not remember me, do you know what I mean? I was only 15 or 16 years of age. Then after being in Dublin for about 2 years, I heard about the Bujinkan and ninjutsu. And of course, again, inspiration comes from film. Yeah, I'm a big film fan. And as a kid, you know, I was always down to the DVD shop renting videos to watch martial arts movies because that was my obsession, right? And some people say obsessions are unhealthy, and I said, no, you can't become excellent at something if you're not obsessed with it, right? And maybe sometimes that obsession is what drives people to be excellent. If you're not obsessed, you're only going to be mediocre in that sense. So I latched onto the ninja movies, latched onto the idea of ninja as the ultimate warrior. And Brian McCarthy was the guy who was teaching ninjutsu at the time. He was the first black belt in Ireland. He brought Bujinkan Ninpo Taijutsu to Ireland. And he had written a few articles in martial arts magazines, in Irish Fighter and things like that. And some of the stuff he was writing about made sense to me. So from Kempo Karate, I tried to go into McCarthy's dojo, but when I got there, confluence of circumstance didn't let me get in because he had a buzzer on the door and a camera, and there was a couple of people saying, no, you're not coming in, you're too young. So I was 15 and a half, 16. These were grown men, so obviously they had a closed off environment, and on that day particularly, maybe there was no kids in the class or teens in the class. There was only adults in the class, maybe. I can't say for sure, but I was turned away then anyway. And then about half a year later, I moved back home and I took up some kickboxing, training with different kickboxing instructors. Didn't find it really gratifying or satisfying. Don't get me wrong, the training was hard, the training was good, but it was kickboxing, it wasn't ninjutsu, it wasn't what I was looking for. And then by the time I was 17, I'd moved to Germany for a year, worked in hotels there for a year, and then came back and joined the army. So I was 17 going on 18, and then came back and joined the army in about April 1990. So I joined the army in February 1990. In April 1990, I started training with Brian McCarthy. And I stayed with Brian for 9 years in total. And I also, about 2 months after I started that, I also started judo. For me, judo was close by. It was at the house. It was another training session, and it was a weak link in what I could do, because I could punch and kick, but I couldn't throw and I couldn't fight on the ground. And I seen kind of judo as that thing that would fill that gap for me. And the Bujinkan, as you know, is a Koryu system, or it's an organization that has 9 schools of Koryu martial arts, which are ancient martial arts or old martial arts, and there's no newaza in those groundwork. Primarily because they're battlefield. The closest they get to the ground is kneeling on somebody and stabbing them on the battlefield and then getting back up, maybe to fight, or their objective is to get back up to their feet as quickly as possible, and most of the time that's hard because they're wearing armour in the battlefield. Yeah? And newaza didn't really become a thing until the late 19th century, 1880s, 1890s, 1900s, and it didn't become a speciality until about, say, 1910, where it started to develop. So it's relatively new, yeah, in terms of, you know, martial arts evolution. There was aspects of it, pinning techniques, arm locks and controlling techniques, but it wasn't as developed and expanded as it is today. I mean, most people who trained newaza back in the 1910s probably wouldn't even recognise what ne was is in the Kodokan Judo, never mind Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. So that's just a personal opinion. But from there then, after 5 years in the army, or nearly 6, I left the army, moved to Germany, opened up my own martial arts club in Germany, full-time, teaching full-time. And I had about 60 students, 30 kids, 30 adults approximately. I was training 6 days a week.
And were you training in Bujinkan, or was it?
I was the last BBD dojo in Germany. But for the last year, I'd left the BBD and was trying to find my way. I was a little bit lost, like you would if you step away from one teacher or organization. So I then went under nobody in particular, but just trained with guys like Dieter Kanya and a couple of other people in Germany who, in my mind, Dieter Kanya is probably the best Bujinkan Budo Taijutsu practitioner in Germany, but he's very low key. Excellent, deep knowledge, him and his wife. I don't know if he teaches anymore, but he has taught some, really good practitioners in Germany, and I have to give him his dues. He kind of gave me the focus towards the Bujinkan. I could have gone to Genbukan or Jininkan. I don't think, Jininkan was kind of around then, but not really. But I went to the Bujinkan, from the Bujinkan blind dojos to the Bujinkan proper. And there was a huge difference then moving from the BBD to the Bujinkan. So the BBD had some aspects of traditional martial arts training, but was very modernized in their approach. There was a lot of technique co-optation, so taking techniques from other martial arts to fill the gaps of things for modern fighting. And we were well conditioned, well trained. We were walking around like Sherman tanks. We were mad fit. A lot of the guys worked in the security industry. A lot of guys worked the doors. And we sparred hard, almost Kyokushinkai style. Okay. Like for my black belt in the BBD was 20 fights for Shodan. So that was a mix of what they call Kihon Kumite in karate, which is basically punch into the body, no gloves, no groin guards, no mouth guards, nothing. And then some kind of randori for nagiwaze for throwing, and then some newaze fighting on the ground. But we weren't taught newaze. It was like, if you know it, use it, And at that stage then I'd become an eclectic martial artist in that sense that I was picking things from different places to supplement what I was doing in the BBD, because basically the BBD wasn't like the Bujinkan proper in that it was incomplete. Right. From a Bujinkan perspective, not from a martial arts perspective. People have to understand that from a martial arts perspective, everybody who trains in the BBD are really good martial artists. They're just not doing Bujinkan Budo Taijutsu or Ninpo Taijutsu. They're doing a modern eclectic hybrid martial art. Simple. And that's, like Brian had started out as the guy who brought ninjutsu and the Bujinkan to Ireland, and he had followed that path, and up to a certain point he was willing to go, and then after that he changed his own personal life. He left the Bujinkan and created his own organization and moved on in his direction, which was his path. So then I went from Germany after about 4 or 5 years. I moved to France and spent a year living there and working there, primarily in security industry and learning French. But then that had a short life, and then I came home. And I went working in the security industry in Ireland, just regular security guard and door work, and kind of as a career path, that's kind of a natural pathway for a soldier and a martial artist, I think, to go into security, because that sense, for some of us, that sense of, needing to protect those around us that are vulnerable, protect society and contribute to society. Because in the martial arts, you're kind of ingrained with that. You have to be a good person, a member of society, a member of your club, a member of your community. People have to look up to you. And this is, again, this thing, when you go back to Kwai Chan Kane from Kung Fu, you get this kind of deep set idea that's not necessarily visible. Yes. But it's there. It's there, yeah. So that's kind of basically my martial arts trajectory. So while I was in Germany, I studied a bit of Wing Chun. I studied a few other bits and pieces. Had people visit my dojo, cross-trained, sometimes hostilely, sometimes not, mostly not. Yeah, the old days where people turn up and go, you know, hey, I want to fight you. Yeah, no problem. What style do you do? Muay Thai. No problem. Right, let's go. And take the sword off the wall and say, ready? And I go, oh, I'm here to spar. I'm here to box with you. I'm here to, but no, my martial art has every weapon. And then it turns into, well, I'm not here to challenge you. I'm just here to spar. Right, because if you're here to challenge, I have a sword. You use what you use, I use what I use. It's a different kettle of fish. Yeah? And they're looking at you like you have two heads, going, I didn't expect this. Well, different strategy, different thought process.
I think that's the difference with the Bujinkan, I find, because we use everything.
Yeah.
All weapons, everything. It's all, people don't really get it. I know it gets a bad rap on YouTube because there is a lot of bad stuff up there, but they don't realise what's actually in it.
Yeah. Well, you see, here's the other thing. Because there's so much stuff in the Bujinkan, it's very hard to learn it all.
That's it, exactly.
And it's very hard to be good at it all. Because it's so spread. It's easy to be good at striking. There's only like a jab, a cross, a hook, an uppercut. Yeah?
Pretty much, yeah.
And you learn that until you can do it naturally without thinking. You go to karate, there's punches, different types of punches, elbow strikes, knees, kicks. Go to Muay Thai, same thing. Go to, I don't know, K1 kickboxing, not much different. It's just the Dutch version of Muay Thai mixed with Kyokushinkai karate. So if you understand where something comes from, you can understand how they approach things in terms of martial arts. And martial arts being in the terms of martial sports, combat sports. And that's what most people know about martial arts is a combat sport. And then a lot of people look at, you know, video clips of people doing long distance woo-woo stuff and people go reacting like that, you know. Look, some people live in fantasy land, yeah, and other people follow that and they want to believe in that and they can if they want. Yeah. But real martial arts requires contact, requires diligence in training and practice. Even the martial athletes from the modern martial arts, let's say MMA, which again is a hybrid system, which is, in my view, it's a mix of wrestling, judo, jiu-jitsu, boxing, kickboxing, Thai boxing, to pull everything into it. Whatever works. You know, style doesn't really matter at the end of the day, so long as it works and you survive, or you come out of the competition or the fight or the self-defense situation unharmed or minimally harmed. Yeah, if it works, it works. You know, a punch is a punch is a punch. It's not really style dependent because your nervous system is already trained in martial arts. That's my personal belief. Your body already is programmed for martial arts. You just have to find a system that develops that pulls it out of you. It's like, throw a baby into water, he can swim. Throw a child into water, different kettle of fish. Because the baby can swim naturally through instinct. The child has lost instinct through being reared.
Yes.
And totally can't swim, right? So it's again belief as well. Put them in the water often enough, not in a non-traumatic environment, they learn to swim quickly. But if you traumatize them by trying to teach them how to swim, they'll get a block towards it, so they won't learn how to swim quickly. And that's the thing with martial arts. You can teach children how to do martial arts through play. Kids are always wrestling and pulling out of each other. Look at them, look at what they do. Look at babies walking, and when they first fall over and they sit down and then they fall backwards gently and then their head touches the ground. It doesn't smack off the ground, but if a child who's 4, 5, 6 years of age falls, they smack their head because they forgot how to fall.
Makes sense. So it's,
like, in terms of when they're a baby and they fall, it's not cognizant, but it's instinctive. When they're a child and they fall, their fall is cognizant.
Yes.
The fall is recognizable as, oh shit, this is going to hurt me. Oh shit, it has hurt me, right? And they forget their instincts. You know, so.
And I think that is the hardest part of martial arts because, you know, you walk a certain way naturally, and then you go to a martial arts club and they say, right, left foot here, right foot here, turn this here, and it's completely unnatural to the way we actually move.
Yeah.
And that could be, and then obviously you go from different styles and they all have their own little.
Well, what I would say is they're teaching tools. Because it doesn't matter what style you come from, what style you practice, what stance you take, how deep it is, how high it is, how wide it is, doesn't matter. In a real fight, you're going to stand in a specific way that most people will recognize. People in Koryo martial arts were saying, oh, we don't do sparring. And anyway, it all just descends into kickboxing. Of course it does, because that's the way you're naturally programmed. Your body is already programmed for martial arts, and it's programmed to move in certain ways. But if you don't train those ways, your body, if you're training something that's counterproductive to natural movement, and your expectation is to be able to do what you do in a dojo, in a street fight or in a self-defense situation, you're living in fairyland.
Very lost.
Very lost. Your body movement is always going to be your body movement. Doesn't matter how it looks. It's how it feels for you and how naturally easy it is to move.
Yeah. And we've had this conversation before, but you know, my big thing is the interconnectedness, where we're always focusing on the little nuances of, oh, our art does this and we do that, but 80% of all the art is the same stuff. It's the same concepts. It's just maybe different entries, different.
Every martial art, every traditional Japanese martial art has the same techniques. Whether it's karate, whether it's any other type of traditional jiu-jitsu that has striking in it. Karate has wrist locks, arm locks, and throws. Karate has some controlling techniques for the ground. Most people don't see that because what they see is the competition style karate, not the civilian combat style of karate. And I call it civilian combat because most styles of karate are designed for civilians to defend themselves.
That don't have.
Yeah, if they're not wearing army and not carrying long pole arms, it's not military. And even then, in those days, it was more like militia than it is military in modern context. You worked for a lord, you had a position as a samurai or as a serf, right? And you were pulled together once a year for 3 months training to maintain your skills, and that was it. And I'm not saying that's actually fact that they'd done it for 3 months, I'm just using that as an example. And it's the same in the Middle Ages in Europe, and it's the same here in Ireland. We had our own martial arts, you know, heavily influenced by European martial arts. Especially, you know, in terms of as it got into the later centuries, like the Normans, and then you had the Gallo Glass, and then Irish military served all over the world. The Gallo Glass fought in wars in Europe, and people think there were only warriors who fought in Scotland and Ireland. They weren't. You know, so and again, then going into my future as a military person, and then into civilian security contract, and then a military training advisor. Irish soldiers have fought in every army around the world for centuries. So warriorship is in our culture. We're not called a fighting Irish for nothing. I mean, most of us would probably have a fight with our own shadow if we could, for whatever reason, you know. We are a little bit boisterous and cantankerous at times, especially when we have a few drinks in us. And you know, if you grew up in my generation, it was hard getting away from the chip shop on a Saturday night without somebody getting into a fight. But back then, nobody was stabbing anybody.
No, it was very different.
It was very. You'd have a fight and it'd be a fair fight to a certain extent, and in my father's time, fairer again. You know, so, but fights were fights. And you had to take them. If you didn't take them, you were a coward, and that was it, and that lived with you.
Yeah, so there's always been a huge martial. Ireland has been really at the forefront of martial arts in recent times, from the 50s, 60s, when it started to come over.
Look at the history of Kempo Karate in Europe. All the Kempo Karate in Europe came from Ireland, because the first American Kempo Karate dojo in Europe was in Ireland, in Dublin. We had a very strong Wado-ryu representation. Here in Ireland, we had 3 Japanese sensei who live here.
That's right.
Yeah. I have my good friend Colin Keating down in Carlow and Fudoshin Wado-ryu Dojo. He's been doing Wado-ryu for 53 years. He's trained with everybody. Everybody you could probably possibly think of in Wado-ryu in Ireland, in Europe, and in Japan. You know, and he was in the military with me. You know, and we were talking about training takes a toll on your body. And if you train hard, it's going to take a hard toll on your body. Colin's had two hip replacements and recently a knee replacement. He's recovering from that. He's 63 and he's back in the dojo. He's doing pull-ups, doing push-ups, lifting weights, going for long walks to rehab his knee. And he's a fitness instructor as well. You know, that man is an example to me. As a martial artist, I don't care what style he does. As a martial artist and a person, he represents resilience and endurance and perseverance. Yeah, he's constantly looking and researching and studying and trying to grow and develop, and he hasn't stopped, and he's not going to stop, and he's not letting any physical impediments block him.
Yeah, it's very different, to a lot of. Although I suppose the sports martial arts are what everybody sees at the minute, and because they got work ethics, and I suppose there's something at the end of it. You could become a champion or you become rich, but
I'm not going to knock anybody by saying this, and I hope I'm not. There's a difference between a martial artist and a martial athlete. You can be a martial athlete when you're young, but to stay at this stay in the martial arts for a long time, you have to think of longevity. MMA, great, you make loads of money, sure, but how long will you stick at it?
Yeah, it's a short lifespan.
Yeah. How many people do we know who've been really competitive in martial arts that can't train anymore at 50 because they have back problems, because they have knee problems, because they destroyed their back doing MMA, BJJ, whatever. Yeah, it's hard.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
I recently went back to judo. Like, I was a brown belt in 1993, right? Thinking at 70 kilos, not being able to win my fights because the guys at that time, when you go for your black belt, there's no weight category. Fighting guys who were 130 kilos, lifting me up, dropping me on the ground, lying on top of me, and that's the end of the fight. You can't beat 50 kilos difference in weight. It's very hard. You have to be really, really skilled, and I wasn't that skilled, right? I'm kind of, what I would say, I probably have dyspraxia, a bit of discoordination. Yeah, I'm not fast, right? I can kick and punch fast, but I can't move fast as a judo player, right? So anyway, I went back to judo. I have 5 more fights to win for my black belt. I'm taking my time. I got injured last year, so I haven't been able to train. For the previous 2 years, I was training and doing well, but I was taking my time. I'm not in a rush to get that black belt, right? But that'll be probably the hardest earned black belt I've had once I get it. Because I go to a judo competition, I could have 5 fights in my weight category. I'm 53, right? I'm over 100. Some of the guys could be 130, 140 kilos. Yeah. So if I get under 100 kilos, I could, probably be in the heavier end. But I'm not into weight cutting, and I think I should be able to deal with somebody who's 110, 120 kilos in judo, using judo, right? And I think kind of it's a bit of a test and a challenge for myself. I just have to get fitter again. Fitness is a big thing in martial arts. I lost my fitness for a while because of injuries, and you step away from martial arts for a while, you take a break when you've had enough of it. I lost my fitness, put on a bit of weight. Getting it back is harder as you get older. Yeah, so if you have it, keep it. Maintain it. You don't have to get bigger, stronger, faster. You just have to maintain what you have as best you can once you get there. Once you get to your goal, your target in fitness, keep it. Don't let it go. It takes less to keep it than it does to get it back. Yeah, it's the same in martial arts. If you stop training for a while, your body stiffens up. You lose momentum. You lose... you think you're... Sometimes in martial arts, you could hit a plateau. You think you're not developing, but really you are. Your body, when you hit a plateau, I think what happens when you hit a plateau in martial arts is that your body is actually now processing all the information. It's assimilated and accumulated, and it's going to take time to work it out on a subconscious level. And then you make a jump, all of a sudden, that's when your body and your mind has worked out those things that you've learned physically on a subconscious level, that they can actually, your body can do them again. That's what plateaus are. I think they're learning kind of rests.
Yeah, to get to I think that's what we used to do. At the beginning of every year, we'd always go back to basics.
Yeah.
And I love that idea of like an onion. You go all the stuff you've learned this year, you go back to the very beginning again, but with a different insight. I think with martial arts, people don't really get, and we know we've talked about this a lot, the concepts and the ideas within the techniques and within the framework. A lot of people just can't concentrate on getting this and doing that for a particular goal.
Okay, it doesn't matter how old you are. When you start a martial art, you are a beginner or a child in that martial art. And that's the philosophy of that martial art, of most martial arts, is when you're a beginner, you're a child. You learn as a child. So as a child in the martial art, and we're speaking metaphorically here, again, doesn't matter if you're an adult or not, your goal is to acquire and get good at stuff. So you're in a hurry, and you're in this massive hurry, and it becomes really frustrating when you don't develop. But you don't realize you're not developing because of your physical and mental limitations.
Yeah.
So once somebody points out what your physical and mental limitations are, especially your physical ones, because that's usually the first barrier, you go away and address them by getting fitter and more flexible. Then you make a jump. But when you've reached, let's say, your capacity, after that, it's all about what you understand, the concepts and the principles, how you chain things together, how you pull everything you've learned together in isolation into one fluid system that you can move from one thing to another. Yeah, would that be kind of...
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think that's just, for me, that's how you evolve in the arts. You've got to go to that level. You're trying to go to, like we always used to break stuff down. Look at the technique. Would it really work? What if we did it this way? And we broke it down and we figured it out. And not saying that instructors were right or wrong, but looking from, this is what it says here, you go, well, would it? What about this situation? And I think when we used to break stuff down like that, you begin to see the principles of, this is what it's trying to teach us. It's not necessarily left and right.
I think what you're saying is like 100%. And I think there's a misunderstanding in society in general about martial arts and what you can do or can't do with them. And I think that relates to people's perception of what is in the movies. Again, reverting back to the classic movies, sensei is always right, There's no pain in this dojo, is there? No, sensei, that kind of stuff. Real martial arts teachers aren't really like that. Some would be, but that's because they're insecure and don't know what they're doing.
Yes.
Right? So some martial arts teachers are short with their students because they don't have time and they're trying to get through a planned lesson. Yeah. Certainly in modern martial arts training, you're dealing with a lot of parents too. Yeah. And you have to be very careful teaching martial arts in society today because, child protection and stuff like that. We are responsible for children training in dojos. And a big thing for me is that training for children has to be a safe and playful environment, not a tyrannical environment. Although there is a certain amount of goodness to be said about tyranny in a dojo. And what I mean by that is personal discipline, external discipline, internal discipline, doing what you're told, doing what you're asked to do, more so than what you're told. But when you're told, and you're told with urgency, understanding that there's no debate or negotiation in it. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that's what's missing in some children's lives these days, including my own.
Yeah, no, I agree 100%. Like when myself and Anthony used to teach the kids, it was good cop, bad cop, wasn't it? It was always, somebody had to be the real cool one, and then someone had to.
Child safety and child protection is really important in martial arts training today, because if you don't protect the child in a learning environment, they're not going to go on to be the adult in the learning environment in the dojo. They're then not going to go on to be the instructor in the dojo. Many people do martial arts, and they're martial arts hobbyists because they're hybrid hobbyists. They're jumping from one martial art to the other all the time. Yeah. Some of them are actually very skilled martial artists in what they specialise in, and they're looking for an alternate answer somewhere else, and that's fine. And there's nothing wrong with that, and that's actually a great thing, because you're bringing also what you do from your martial art into the other martial art you're doing. But some people are just kind of cashing in.
Yeah.
And
we used to see it a lot where the instructor, you're doing a technique, and then people just hanker. And like, people hanker for hankering's sake because they can, not because they need to. Mm-hmm. Whereas not working with the technique, and maybe adapt it, but just keep, every time it was just different.
I think some people probably understand the concept of henka. What's henka?
What is henka? Yeah.
Right. There is a set technique. There's probably 2 henkas, and they're formal variations. Well, in our martial arts in particular, a lot of people are guilty of just henkaing the shit out of everything, and it becomes something totally different from where you started. So therefore, you're not studying the concepts and principles in that form here. It's gone something else.
It's gone something else. And there was probably 3 or 4 techniques along the way that dealt with that.
Yeah.
But they didn't go through the process.
Yeah, so because people are lazy. Biggest thing we know about martial arts, everybody wants a shortcut to the secrets. Yeah. There's no secrets. The best kept secret is that all secrets are found in the basics.
That is the biggest secret, is basics.
What's the difference between an advanced practitioner and a beginner?
Just better basic, or better understanding of the basics.
Better understanding of the basics. Better application of the basics. better way of explaining the basics. You know, in the army they have this thing of explain, demonstrate, imitate, practice. EDIP. I explain to you what I'm going to do. I'm now going to demonstrate what I'm going to do. Go and imitate that. Now, let's practice it. And in the practice section, you're increasing your reps. You're increasing your speed. You're increasing all the attributes you bring to a combative scenario. But in the imitate, you're doing it slowly. It's broken down. So when people say Matt Thornton's concept of aliveness, yeah, within BJJ, within the straight blast, within wherever, right? People think that's new. It's not. Aliveness has been in martial arts for eternity. The reason a lot of Korean martial arts don't practice in an alive setting is they're using weapons, they're doing wrist locks and arm locks that can tear tendons in your arms, and a lot of people go, no, that's just an excuse. And I'm like, not really. Not really. When you're trying to learn a wrist lock and the object of the lesson is to learn the wrist lock, well, you're going to let your partner punch slowly and he's going to go with you.
Absolutely.
Yeah? If you're trying to learn how to defend against a sword cut, and people might say, why would you want to do that? Well, that's part of the system. It is. Sorry. When you study Koryu, you study the use of all these weapons. And your body movement is based on the use of all these weapons, especially the longer weapons. So it doesn't look like modern boxing or kickboxing or even karate. Karate is new. Karate is only 120, 130 years old. What we see today is Shotokan, Wada Ryu, Kyokushinkai, Goju Ryu. Yeah. The Okinawan karate might be a little bit more robust. Some of the styles, like Shorite and stuff like that. But, you know, most modern karate styles are brand new. They're whole new education systems. Well, people don't realize a roundhouse kick or a side kick didn't exist in karate 120 years ago. They come from, do you know where? Savate dans la rue, French martial arts. Because the French military advisors training Japanese military in Japan, and people who've done karate seen this roundhouse kick, seen this side kick, and they stole it. And then they stole the methodology of teaching in line-out drills.
Okay.
That comes from the French military training advisors teaching Japanese military and lining their own guys up to practice savate.
Yeah, I've seen some of that. That's actually cool, like a kata, yeah. You'd think, when you see it, you think they've taken it from the Japanese, because that's where we see that.
Comes from the French military teaching the Japanese military as military training advisors. They seen these two kicks and maybe a few more, took them and put them in, like the crescent kick. Yeah? Mm-hmm. Again, savate. Okay. Yeah. So, you know, people think things come from, you know, traditional Japanese martial arts, this comes from there. No, that comes from savate. There's tore or torite, wrist locks, arm locks, all in karate.
Yeah, it's actually, especially with the Okinawan stuff, when you see what the actual kata, you see a lot of them, and that do, some people don't know the bunkai behind them. Mm-hmm. But there is, like you say, throws, wrist locks, all in the kata.
That's the other thing too. When you learn by rote and you do what you're told and you follow what your teacher tells you and you don't ask questions, you won't discover things. Most people don't know in karate, like junior people in karate, don't know what bunkai is or didn't know what bunkai is. I certainly didn't know when I was doing karate what bunkai was, because they didn't tell us, because they didn't know. Because our teachers were first and second dance. What is a first dan? He's a beginner. Shodan, first dan, means beginner. You've served your apprenticeship, you know all the basic skills of the system, now your learning starts. Yeah. People think you get a black belt, you're a master of martial arts and you're this expert fighter. You're not.
No. Most of them can't even tie their belts at that stage properly.
Well,
me being one of them.
but like this is another misconception and a fantasy that people have. Yeah.
Absolutely.
When we
100%.
go when we look at personal safety and self-defense training, or reality-based self-defense, all great things. Don't get me wrong, right? Everything to help somebody learn to protect themselves, improve their life, improve their quality of life and their self-esteem and their ability to move freely around the world without impediment or interference. Great. But people think, you know, if you get into a fight and you have a black belt, oh, you're this ultimate weapon. And you know, I remember growing up as a kid and people saying, have you got your karate license? The license was just a membership, right? It wasn't a license, but they called it a license. And then people say, oh, he's registered down in the Garda station because he's a lethal weapon. No, he's a lethal Aegis. But, you know, do you know what I mean? Some people thought more of themselves than what they actually were. And of course, Bruce Lee fantasy movies helped kind of expand that. And if there was one guy who could do a jump and flying kick in the town, he was Bruce Lee, and nobody was messing with him. You know what I mean? Take, for example, we look at kind of street altercations or personal safety and self-defense. And how many people do you know that growing up you thought, that guy's a lunatic, I'm not fucking with him. Sorry for cursing, yeah? But I'm not messing with him, right? Why? Because once in his whole life, between the ages of 7 and 9, he fought with somebody and bet them up, and after that, this guy had a reputation as a lethal fighter. Right? Or he'd done what's called a status-seeking show, ran across the road to somebody he didn't know, hopped off him, right, and walked away from it, and people went, he's crazy, I'm not messing with him. Yeah? And that guy lived on that reputation for the rest of his life, probably never had to fight again. Yeah? But people were thinking at that level. That's a strategic level of thinking.
Yeah, that is clever. But then there's also the other side where you get your black belt, and we've seen it before, and you think you can fight. And people don't realize that a natural street fighter, natural rhythm, natural movement, will just tear them apart.
People don't need to learn martial arts to be martial artists. Again, the natural street fighter, the one person whose heart rate doesn't go above 150 at any stage, you know, whether he's a sociopath, psychopath, doesn't matter. But these people were born and bred to fight. They're designed. Their personal design is for fighting. And they can do it innately and learn quickly. So if you go back to the concept of the tribe, right? No more than 150 people approximately, right? Out of that 150 people, there was 2 people that were the killers or the fighters. The psychopath who you would send to your enemy to terrorize, and then the other guy, similarly built, but not a psychopath, to control him and to put a leash on and reel him back in. So if you're going to war against an enemy tribe for resources, which was what all war is about, let's be real, it's not about politics, it's about resources. Politics and failed diplomacy, that's what war is. Yeah. So negotiations over resources, over access, over trade, over whatever, it's all resources, right? If you go to war against an enemy to take over resources, what are resources? Well, land, animals, people, minerals, control. If you defeat an enemy, kill all the males and leave only the females and the children there, and this is speaking from an anthropological perspective, the females and the children at a certain age will get absorbed. Anything older than 9 or 10 gets killed. And anything younger than 5 or 6 gets killed. And that's proven in history through the anthropological investigations for Native American tribes, especially the Comanches. Yeah, so people are always, living in this world of, oh my God, you can't do that. Our ancestors have done that. Everybody on this planet is descended from a killer of some sort.
Okay, all right, we'll take a quick break and let that settle. What we'll do is we'll come back in part 2 and we'll talk a little bit more about your military background, your security experience and where you're going from there.
Great, super, looking forward to it.
Brilliant, thanks George.
No problem.